Hey all, Grolo here. A few days ago, I watched the interview that Tracey participated in during Quantum Vegas 2955 called Tech and Tools. Now, Tracey is the managing director of technical operations at Cloud Imperium, and he has a really cool history in the industry, which I'm not going to get into right now. You should definitely go watch the full video, though. It's all there, and it'll be linked below. So, this was a great chat. There was a lot packed into it, and if I covered the whole thing at once, we might be here for a few hours. So, what I'm going to do is just break out a few of his responses and dig into them a bit. I don't know how many. For now, just one. Maybe more later. One of the questions he responded to was about concerns from the community that by the time Star Citizen ships, it'll be outdated or will have been surpassed by other games. Now, when I hear this concern, I always kind of chuckle. Like, to me, it's kind of like asking, like, well, how is Windows going to keep up with the times? Right? Or, I mean, how is anything going to keep up? How is Mac OS going to keep up? Or how is Netflix going to keep up with the times? Like, you know, other things are going to come out and they're going to surpass it. Like, software is, it's like art, I guess. Like, it's never finished. It's only abandoned. So any software project is always a perpetual work in motion. And I think, like, maybe some of this fear is rooted in like single player non-live games that do kind of have a finish line as far as development goes, but any live service game like World of Warcraft, I mean, look how World of Warcraft has evolved over its 20-year history. Like, where's the competition that has unseated it? And you know, you could go on and on, and we're going to get into it a little bit more. First, I want to actually watch Sean Tracey's response together. We're just going to watch this one question, and then we're going to come back and chat a little bit more about this.
Another question that we had was, you know, people are worried about Star Citizen staying cutting edge, right? You'll hear some of the critique and some of the naysaying include things like, well, by the time it comes out, something else will have caught up with it. That hasn't happened yet, in my view, but people are worried about that. And game engines and tools do evolve, right? They evolve rapidly, or they can. How do you and the team stay ahead of the curve, on the leading edge, on the cutting edge, when developing new technology?
It's a great question, and it's an important topic, especially because we've been running as long as we have. You know, and the reminder I would make is that we are out. Right? You guys are playing it right now. We have maintained and released a game over the course of these years for so long and have kept up. Absolutely. I wouldn't say we're at risk of massively falling behind as we sit right now. When you look at shipped games in this gen, even in the last year, let's say, or so, very much on par. I'm not talking about necessarily bug-free experience or hitching and things like that, but I mean the actual technology employed and used behind the scenes. No, there's really not that huge of a difference. So I don't think we're at that big of a risk of falling behind, is the reality. There's a couple other reasons for that. One of the biggest ones, honestly, guys, is Chris Roberts. He is a technophile. He loves this stuff. Not only does he love game development itself, but the technology that enables game development. So when you have a CEO that's, I mean, his ears to the ground all the time. So when there's an obscure GDC talk about something real fancy and nice and hard, right, you might get a message from Chris going, hey, I was looking around at this, check this out. So it's hard to fall behind when you have a CEO like that, right? Because he's not really going to let that happen. You still could. But generally, culturally, we are very tech-driven. We haven't really been a we're working on that now, but we've generally been a technology-driven company, and that just makes it so that is your main interest driver, what you're looking at in the industry and what you're looking at everybody else doing, basically. So how do we keep up with other engines? It's an interesting question because keep up is a weird way to say it.
Right.
We obviously keep an eye on what Unreal's doing, on what Unity's doing, because I personally, and I know Benoit and even Marco and Chris feels the same way, that's where I feel like, and for our developers, that's where we're competing. On our internal tools, our internal tech, on our everything. I want to be able to give all the Star Citizen developers, all the Squadron 42 developers, an engine and tool set as good as Unreal, as good as Unity. So that all comes behind it. So we have to know what's going on with it. But tons of what they do is not at all fit for purpose for us. So what we prefer to do is take the solved problem that they may have, but make it fit for purpose for us. So we'll take the idea, reapply it, and take it further. DNA is a good example, right? 3Lateral had gene splicing, we ended up with DNA, and they took it to metahuman, so we kind of branched. Heck, the engine is the same way. So yeah, I don't think we're really at risk of falling behind, and I think we do a pretty good job staying on top of the tech that's coming out nowadays. It's harder and harder because I know players will see a lot of the other Unreal updates or development tech that goes out there. A good one is like Nanite or Lumen, or there's pieces of tech that Unreal is making. But the thing that I try to remind people, even though they've seen, a good example is Nanite. We were just talking about it the other night with someone. That's been revealed for a couple of years now. There's not a single game with it out that's chipped on it. I'm not saying that makes the technology bad. I'm saying it's probably just not ready, right? Or somebody's not ready to use it to ship. And there could be 100 other reasons for that, production-wise. So, sorry, long-winded answer, but
no, it's a great
basically, we have to keep our ears to the ground with the tech. Chris is a super technophile, so you're not going to be able to hide too much good new things coming out of the industry from him.
He kicks open the door and goes, "Nanite."
Sure. Well, he basically goes, here's the benefits this is bringing. What could we do that's somewhat similar?
Right.
Right. But never does Chris go, and I love this. This is one of the things I'm so thankful for. Never does Chris go, I want Nanite.
Right.
Like, copy it.
Right.
Never, right? It's always make it fit for our purpose, make it custom to Star Citizen, and that's what I like about working here, is that we're not just copying or doing it exactly the same as everybody else.
All right. A few things that Sean Tracey mentioned there that I wanted to highlight. One, Chris Roberts is a technophile. Two, CIG is a tech-driven company. It has a highly technical culture. Now, these things are important. I've worked at all kinds of companies, and I can attest to the fact that the person at the top matters a lot. They will shape the organization. I've worked for orgs led by businessmen, a technical savant, product guy, and others. I couldn't even tell you what the hell they were. And that shit trickles down. It affects everyone and everything. Now, I'm sure that people are going to be all over this, right? Like, about how CIG shouldn't be technically focused. It should be focused on making a game. Listen, nobody will ever be happy with the balance they strike. And I want a finished game as much as anyone. But you do not want that game coming from some product-driven, deadline-focused organization. Trust me. That shit will be built on a house of cards the likes never before seen. And it will ship, and it will immediately begin to buckle under the weight of its own technical debt. You will get a better product in the end from an engineering-led organization. Do you want a good real-world example that I have personal experience with? Look at Etsy and Shopify. Etsy is a product-led organization. Shopify is an engineering-led organization. They compete in similar spaces. They have very different approaches. And this is a tangent, but it's applicable. I'm going to bring it back. Go Google for, it's called Stevie's Google Platforms Rant. You'll find it on GitHub. It's a whole white paper, but there is a quote in that, or not white paper, it's a whole just rant that the guy posted on GitHub. And in there is a quote. He says that a product is useless without a platform. Or more accurately, A platform-less product will always be replaced by an equivalent platformized product. I could not agree with this quote more. That's why I wrote it down. But a product-focused organization does not think that way. A technical-focused organization, an engineering-led group, does. Just watch what happens with Etsy and Shopify over the next decade. Mark my words. So, as players of the future Star Citizen game, we want a technically minded, engineering-led CIG. Trust me, we do. It's the only way we are going to get the game we want and have it be built and delivered in a sustainable way. Now, Sean Tracey goes on to talk about how they keep an eye on their competitors. They don't copy, they obtain inspiration, and they adapt it in a way that fits their purpose. And this tracks too. It's how most engineering teams work. You're always looking at what the other teams are up to, and you're always taking inspiration, but systems are complicated, and concepts rarely move across like these vast borders cleanly. It's always some sort of adaptation. Now, let's talk about keeping up with the Joneses a little more, or how Star Citizen is not going to be outdated by the time it ships, or possibly ever. And for this, I went ahead and broke out the whiteboard here again. I have a diagram here that I jotted down. I'm starting with the back end. We're going to talk about the front end. But as you know, the back end is my area of expertise and place of comfort. And so we're going to start talking about this, and then we're going to apply these concepts to the client, the game client. They're not all that different. They're both very complex systems. As you can see here, we have our entity graph and our global storage. We have the replication layer and the game servers and the players, and there's a whole lot more that's not represented here, but that's okay. This is kind of the system they envisioned for a 1.0, right? They're not quite there yet, but at some point they're going to be. The game is going to go out into the world, and players are going to start playing with it, and they're going to break this system. They're going to stress it, they're going to fracture it, they're going to start doing things in the game that no amount of alpha or beta testing will have prepared CIG for, and CIG is going to have to make adjustments. They're going to have to improve the performance of the game server. They're going to have to improve the bandwidth within the replication layer. They're going to have to improve the number of queries per second that the entity graph can handle, and so on and so forth, right? And hopefully, Star Citizen player count trends up over time, and it's going to place ever more load on this thing. And CIG is going to be feeling pressure on the back end to make the system here that we're looking at more efficient as time goes on, right? So it's not going to be all at once, right? Maybe within the first 6 months, they make some changes to this rack of game servers, and they get these things running 20% faster, right? And then maybe in the 6 months after that, they increase the queries per second that the entity graph can handle by 40%, right? They have a big breakthrough. Maybe in the year that follows, they've done something with the global storage to reduce the space on disk that things they are persisting take by 25%, right? Maybe the year following, all right, because so now we're like in year 3 now. Maybe in year 3, they reduce the bandwidth required within the replication layer by 10%. Maybe they reduce in that same year. Maybe they reduce the bandwidth between players and the replication layer by maybe 5%. That seems like a little, but these numbers all add up, right? If you take 5% there, 10% within the replication layer, the 20% performance on the game servers, maybe that's increased further by the reduction in bandwidth in front of the game servers. 40% more queries per second being handled by the entity graph, combined with game server performance increases, combined with bandwidth reduction. Like, all these things start to add up, right? Like, it's never oh man, we need to upgrade Star Citizen's backend. That's not how it works. It's always one piece at a time. And it's usually in such small incremental amounts that you never actually notice it as a player. Like, CIG will make some improvement, it'll show up in some release notes as a bullet point, and you'll completely ignore it because it makes no sense to you, and you couldn't care less. But it's something like one of these adjustments. Probably a lot smaller. I'm using some big numbers in some of these cases just to prove, but you get the point. By year 5, this back-end's performance characteristics may look completely different from when it launched. And it's all basically invisible to you because it's just how the game runs in the back. You don't even see this. But we're talking about this because the same concepts are, I would imagine, apply to the game client, right? The virtual space is another way of looking at it. I have ArcCorp down there. You just can't see it. So while the servers and the backend architecture and all that stuff represents Star Citizen's physical footprint in the actual physical world, this stuff exists in the virtual world, right? Inside your monitor, your screen. The same things are going to apply. Like, over time, CIG is going to make incremental improvements to Star Engine. You know, you'll see bullet points coming out, like this changed and that improved and this improved. There's going to be improvements to the game client itself, to the updater, to the launch screen. Like, all these things are going to be improving at their own cadence, independent of one another. You know, maybe there's who knows? Like, there's some new freaking crazy monitor technology that demands that assets be higher resolution or something like that. I guarantee you that the artists and stuff that are working on the assets behind the starships and the planets in Star Citizen, they're not exporting the highest quality assets they can today. If they're whatever assets they're dropping into the game client, like, they are a scaled down resolution of the maximum available. Like, if CIG has to do a big push and update the resolutions of its graphics to meet some new standard, like, that's not going to be a huge deal. And as you can see, who knows, a few years from now, it may be AI doing that job instead of people. And we're already seeing this, right? We have seen this over the past 10 years. I saw some comments on that YouTube video that we just watched the clip from. Go check it out. But there's some comments in that video where people were like, they were criticizing Sean Tracey because Sean Tracey said the game's already out. You already are playing it. And people, no, the game's not out. You know, they were blasting them back. But it is. Like, you can put your hands on it now. You saw what Star Citizen looked like 10 years ago. You see what it looks like today. Like, you are seeing them keep pace. They've already proven they can do it. Like, they keep ramping up the fidelity and ramping up the thing and developing the Star Engine and adding the stuff. Like, in some cases, it may be even easier for them to keep pace with user and player expectations because they're running their own engine. You know, I don't know this for sure. I'm not a game dev, but like, I would imagine that if I was relying on Unreal Engine 5, that it would be a lot more difficult for me to make the jump from like UE5 to UE6 whenever UE6 drops, because companies like that, they're packaging these things up as products, and usually whenever you have a major version bump like that, like there's always breaking changes and like trying to integrate that into your. I mean, just look at like Ashes of Creation when it went from UE4 to UE5. That was a pretty big deal for them. That was a lot of work. Since CIG they're not on the hook to productize Star Engine. In this interview, Sean Tracey even said they absolutely were not thinking about that, and they had no plans on doing that. And actually, their contract prevents them from doing so. That actually is kind of liberating in a way. Like, not having to do that just means small incremental improvements forever that the game is always in sync with, right? So in some ways it may be easier for them to keep up with the Joneses. And again, I said it and then I moved on, but like I don't know if it was last Citizen Con or the one before that, whenever they were showing off the new Genesis, right? Like, based on what we've seen about the Genesis technology coming out, that's going to be a real overhaul on how these planets are populated with trees and rocks and all the foliage and animals and all that stuff. And like, it was very clear whenever I was looking at the demonstration that the planets are going to look vastly superior post-Genesis than they do today. That's just an example of like one independent thing improving and advancing that improves the fidelity and the immersion of the world. Right? Another one that just happened recently was weather. Like, when that landed, I mean, that's more immersion, that's more fidelity, that's more everything, and it looks good, right? This is going to continue at every level in all kinds of ways, and so there's really nothing preventing CIG and Star Citizen from never looking outdated, from never falling behind. Again, I said this at the beginning of the video, but if you think about other software that you're familiar with, your Windows operating system, right? Linux, Netflix, I don't know, whatever your favorite browser is. I mean, these are tools that you have used for decades, in some cases. I mean, Linux came out in 1997. It's going to turn 30 soon. I get that right? Powers the entire internet, basically. Like, how did it keep up? Yeah. I don't see graphics and fidelity and imagery and all that stuff being any different than the complex systems that underpin it. Do you think differently about this? You think I got this wrong? If so, I'd love to hear it. Like, jump into the comments. I would love to debate this. But yeah, whenever I saw that question, because I've seen this question before, and I always thought it was strange. And when I saw Sean Tracey answer it, I just thought, yeah, I should talk about this, and kind of explain how I, as a systems guy, think about this stuff. Because maybe it's not apparent to some players. So hopefully this helped. Hopefully it helps you kind of wrap your head around why it's not a problem and why it doesn't ever have to be a problem. Even if you're not familiar with any game that has ever pulled it off, that doesn't mean one can't. It's definitely possible. There's nothing technically... There's no technical reason that they can't. So anyway, I'm going to leave it at that. Hope it was helpful. I would love to continue this discussion, so jump into the comments below and hit me up with anything. Maybe I'm missing something. If so, let me know. I'd love to dig into that further. If there's anything not clear, just ask away. We can expound upon it. So I'll see you there. Until then, Grolo out.